Hi everyone and welcome. Today we're going to talk about water. Why water? Well, if you make soap, you generally will work with water. Even people like me who work with my own goat milk, I still like to make things, soaps and other preparations, well, like that wintergreen hyaluronic acid, a formula that I just made. You use distilled water. Sometimes I will use other types of water, but generally everything has distilled water in it, especially when soap making. Now, why might that be? Well, because using things like tap water, it can contain several things that you don't want in your soap. Just because your water is filtered doesn't mean that there aren't certain minerals or even bacteria that are safe for you to ingest that you don't want in your soap, because some of them will cause, you've probably heard of the DOS, dreaded orange spots. Oftentimes that comes from folks using tap water. Even rainwater can have some of these things in it. All that aside, generally you want to use distilled water or some other form of really purified water, but in soap making, I really strongly suggest you stick with distilled. If you're not using milk or some kind of a fruit juice or something else, stick with distilled water. But is all distilled water the same? No, it isn't. And that's what I wanted to share with you today, because especially if you're newer to soap making, you might not know to look for this distinction or understand that there are actually different types of distilled water. So this is an empty bottle, but just because it's easier for me to use here in this photo, and I don't have a full bottle of this that I can use in this video. My point is, this is regular distilled water that you might get at, well, Walmart. This is just their name brand, great value. And it's just distilled water. It's nothing else. It's just distilled water, okay? Which means it's gone through a process to remove any minerals, any bacteria, any kind of viruses, anything through the distillation process has been removed from it. If you don't know what distillation is, that's basically where something is boiled and then the vapors from that, are distilled. They are trapped, they're captured, sometimes in glass, and what's left behind are all the nasties you don't want. And I've done a video in the past on how to distill rose water and that sort of things, and this is very similar to that. So anyway, distilled water, regular distilled water, no problem. Well, one day I ran out of distilled water, and I needed some for a preparation, so I ran to the store, which for me is a trip. I have to travel to go to a store. There are no types of businesses where I live. I have to get in the car and go if I want to find something. It's a mini road trip. Not a big deal, but just I'm making that point for a reason. And so I was out of distilled water and decided I needed to get some more water. So I got in the car and I went. They were out of distilled water. But the employee said, but right over there in the baby area, there's more distilled water. So I went over and took a look, and this is what I found. It's got a little baby on it, and it says distilled water. But I want you to look very closely at what's under distilled water. With minerals added for taste. And then here is a listing of those minerals that have been added for taste. And when I read this, I thought, why would you want to give this to a baby? Okay, but let's break it down. So the first ingredient listed is potassium sulfate, which is a magnesium salt. It's used as a sulfate in various different products, as an anticonvulsant, a cardiovascular drug, a calcium channel blocker. Yes, that's right. An anesthetic, and it's an or an analgesic, also used in some cases, and as a fertilizer. Do you really want that in your baby's water? Maybe I'm not going to judge if that's something that's actually beneficial to babies. Okie dokie. But along the lines that I was discussing in my previous video, I try to reduce any additives or chemicals in my products wherever possible. This is an area where it's possible because you can just get plain old distilled water. The next ingredient that's listed here is potassium bicarbonate, which is a compound. It's a type of carbon dioxide. It's used in leavening and baking. It's actually used as a lower salt baking soda for people on salt restricted diets. It's a sort of sold in place of baking powder in some particular areas in the process. But again, that's in the water. It says for taste. Okay, we'll go with that, right? What's the third ingredient here? And then I'm going to explain also why these ingredients may not be good in soap making, especially this third one. The third ingredient that it lists is potassium chloride, also known as potassium salt. It's used as a medication to treat and prevent low blood potassium, which, low blood potassium is a problem for a lot of people, causes vomiting, diarrhea, and certain medications. But what I wanted to talk about these, both potassium bicarbonate and potassium chloride, is that they are oftentimes used to soften water and as a buffering agent to help regulate pH. Well, soap needs to be a specific pH, especially because of the many botanicals and different things that I use and many of you use in soaps. We need the high pH in it, so you really don't want to be messing with the pH too much in soap, because you could actually cause a problem with, especially if you're using botanicals in your soap. By lowering that pH, you could actually effectively cause mold and other problems with the botanicals in your soaps. Just something you want to think about. And why add any more ingredients to your homemade items that you have put so much work into? So when you're buying distilled water, the whole purpose of this video is just to let you know, just be aware of what's on that label. Stay away from the baby area of the stores, because the distilled water is there. I'm not sure what distilled water is used for with babies. I don't have a baby. I'm assuming it's used in formulas. I don't know. Maybe one of you can tell me in the comments what. I could look it up on Google, I'm sure, but because I was doing this video, I didn't take time. I just wanted to describe the differences in these two. But even if you use this for a baby, just keep in mind that it has these additional things in it, and avoid it for soaping. Why do you want to add magnesium sulfate, potassium bicarbonate, or potassium chloride to your soap? Unless your customer asks for it, because if you do, you're going to have to list those things in the ingredients on your soap too. And do you really want to add 3 more chemical or, even naturally occurring things to your soap that you didn't intentionally put in there? Okay, that's really it. There's not much more to say about it. I just wanted to touch on this and just make you aware. And I'm not suggesting that you weren't already aware. Anybody that can read can see this, but if you're in a hurry, you might grab this. As soon as I saw it in the store, I saw that. I thought, what's that purple? It said distilled water. I thought, great, here's some distilled water. I'm out. I found some. And then I saw that and thought, I can't use it. I only bought this one to bring home. It was 90 cents or 88 cents or something. I just bought it to bring home because I wanted to share this with you all. I now have distilled water, have all I need. I can make my own distilled water. I've done it in the past. It's cheaper to just buy it, and it's no better. The very inexpensive stuff that you buy from the store is perfectly fine. Yes, you could make it yourself, but it's going to cost you more, take more time. just buy distilled water. There's no problem with buying distilled water. All that means is it's gone through the process of distillation. That's all you can do is distill it. So your water's probably not, your own distilled water may not even be as good as what you can buy because you don't have the big equipment that may be necessary for doing that kind of large-scale distillation. All right. That's it, everyone. I hope that you learned something from this episode of Hey Patrick. This was the 4th episode. I had a lot of fun coming up with this and discussing with you all. I hope you found something useful in this discussion. Have a fantastic day, everyone, and I'll see you back soon. Goodbye.